Oh my god, are you back from the part 1? Okay, my name is Bisque Dolly. Wait, hold on. Let me do that intro better. Okay, this is part 2, chapter 13, picture of Dorian Gray. Okay, there's a part 1. I had an intro. Okay, I last left off talking about why 1890s there was a new wave of hedonistic philosophy that came through. But it's not true hedonism. It's all sensational. And I mean sensational in the way that they would have used that word at that time. Basically, addictive, self-gratifying, instantly gratifying. It's not real hedonism, because oftentimes, if you really think about what that state of the world was, they were getting pleasure and getting goods and qualities off of, well, you know, colonialism. And we all know the horrors of colonialism, I would hope, if you are part of my following. This idea that all other groups of people and all other nationalities were savage. Yeah, colonialism. It's me from the future, and I just wanted to point out that obviously that school of thought or that type of hedonistic practice would have easily have been popular during colonial, post-colonial, still colonial Europe at that time. So just wanted to point that out, just putting that out there. Okay, bye. And I mean, if you think about it, there's also like the, can I say it, opium wave hitting Europe as well. So I'm not saying that because people were on drugs they gave a shit. They gave less of a shit. But like, you know, there was just a whole wave of a lack of empathy. And I think there were a lot of writers that criticized this, and I feel that good old Oscar Wilde is criticizing that type of mindset by showing people the dangers of how far you can take that school of thought. Dorian's character is a person who has the opportunity to have a picture of someone's soul. And by someone, I mean himself. Dorian has an amazing tool that he could use to essentially save his own soul if he wanted to, because now he has the ability to see how his actions and his choices affect his soul, right? And so, like, if you had such a tool, such a picture, would you still choose to, you know, make bad choices, hurtful choices, unempathetic choices on the basis of your own pleasure and your own selfish wants and desires? Should you never suffer the consequences of it? And I think that also kind of touches on the colonialistic mindset of that time too. It's like, I mean, if they didn't have to witness it, if it wasn't their reality, if they weren't the ones suffering and seeing their entire peoples destroyed by this act that is colonialism, then why should they care? Why would they bother? I mean, it's not they in that time, in that space, that are suffering or having the damnation placed upon them. It's only their soul. Oh, to be damned in Victorian London society. In my mansion, and sacred artifacts from the Mexican people and other cultures that were having their lands ravaged by the Europeans. But there's also another thing that I found interesting as well, was the entire destruction of self. I mean, people experience that through addiction, addiction to certain people, to certain substances, sensations, or even themselves and the things that make them feel beautiful. What I thought was interesting about Dorian was that when he exposes this part of himself, this shameful part of himself the human part of himself, I would posit, because I do think that the portrait, although ugly and grotesque, is his humanity. Sorry. And this beautiful external force that everyone's interacting with as Dorian is actually the demon. Like, Basil sees this, and initially he's shocked. He's in horror. He's like, oh my God, you know? And Dorian observes Basil's reaction of horror upon seeing this painting with this like cold, emotionless gaze. It says here that there was neither real sorrow or real joy, maybe a flicker of triumph. He wanted to see Basil's fearful reaction. He wanted to see Basil in shock. There's almost this vindictiveness quality about Dorian when it comes to Basil. He resents Basil for having compassion. He resents Basil for, you know, showing empathy and also for sticking up for him. Oftentimes I say that, you know, Basil's character is like the little angel on your shoulder that often tries to convince you to do the good thing, to do the compassionate thing, to be considerate, and to show, you know, grace to people who you wouldn't have otherwise have seen in the same light. You know what I mean? Like, it is this idea of being a person who is truly good, truly empathetic. Basil did have a lot of romantic feelings, suppressed romantic feelings for Dorian. And when he painted the portrait initially, he said it revealed too much of himself in there. And he worshipped it even. He kind of took responsibility for this curse. Although he may not be truly responsible, it was his compassion and his, I mean, you see your friend suffering for so many years. Of course you would have a wash of guilt over you and maybe even want to help shoulder that burden with them. That's what normal, compassionate people do. Dorian says each of us has heaven and hell in him. I like the way Oscar Wilde speaks through his characters at times. It can be very profound. Basil begins to do the Lord's Prayer in hopes of saving Dorian's soul. I like how there's like a bit of a disagreement about doing this prayer. Obviously, for Dorian, he feels as all hope is lost, and for Basil, he feels like he still has a chance and all will be forgiven. I mean, this was kind of something that Dorian kind of thought about himself a few chapters back. Was like, oh yeah, if I just tell him, he would understand. I wouldn't have to, you know, deal with this horrible secret. But he decided to deal with it because that way he didn't have to give up doing anything bad anymore, anything selfish, anything that, you know, made him feel pleased. This building of resentment ends up taking over Dorian. How dare this guy feel sorry for me? And then he stabs his friend to death. And he doesn't even care. That's how it ends, everybody. Chapter 13. I'm Miss Dolly. I read Story OK Online for you. I read online for you.